Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I'm joined by Brett Snodgrass here today. And Brett and I did an episode a few weeks ago now. And like literally when we hung up with a call, we started just talking about books. And we're like, yeah, have you read this one yet? Have you read this one? And stuff like that. And Brett's one of the first people that like really kind of is a teacher. I was always reading, but a lot of them were like books that my students would read or books about education and stuff like that. So I've always kind of been a reader, but Brett was one of the first people to like kind of instill in me like, hey, read this for like self-development and
Mm.
business and things like that. So we like to talk about books and hey, what are you reading now and things. But Brett, number one, man, thanks for joining me. And I thought it was just appropriate that we did a podcast on books, man.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, man. I'm super excited to be here. And I love talking about books. I think that when you're reading books, when you're just entrenched in books, that's when you're growing the most. And we
Yeah.
talk about growth a lot. I think one of my core values is just consistently growing. And I remember times in my life that I was just growing a lot, and it was reading because I was reading a lot of books. And when I'm not growing, it's because maybe I've fallen off the wagon of my reading. So
Yeah.
so yeah, man, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, we all talk about growing our businesses or growing our portfolios or growing this. You have to grow individually as well. And a great way to do that is through books and stuff. So let's go ahead and throw out Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki here at the beginning, because I feel like probably 75 to 80% of our guests that we have on the pod, like they always say like, oh, well, I read this book. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that's kind of how I got started in things. So we won't throw Rich Dad Poor Dad into our list. We'll just kind of put that off to the side at the top here and stuff. But Brett, let's start with you, man. What's one of the top books that kind of helped influence you when it comes to just whether it's business, personal, real estate or whatever. What's one of your top books?
Yeah. So I kind of have stories with these books. Obviously, you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I kind of just remember that in the cash flow quadrant. And like I said, we're not going to go into that. That's one book that every real estate investor has to have. So another one for me was really a book called The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
And I really remember this book because I was a substitute school teacher at that time and not making a whole lot of money, but I was driving a pretty nice car at that time. And I was trying to look like I had money, even though I was pretty much dead broke. And I read that book, and it just talked about millionaires and just the average millionaire that you can never tell that they are a millionaire. They're really just a guy living next door. They're driving a used car, living in a pretty modest home, and probably having kind of a mundane sort of business. And that really just changed my life. So I sold that car. I bought kind of more of a beater car, cost like $1,000, and kind of started this trajectory on, you know what? I don't have to be that flashy millionaire. Do I want to be a millionaire? Obviously, I think we all do, especially if you're listening to this podcast. And but I don't have to be that flashy one. That mine can look a little bit different and just kind of like I wanted to resemble the Millionaire Next Door. So yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
book. It's by Thomas Stanley and William Danko, and gotta check it out.
Yeah, I think when I got hired, that was the first book that Brett gave me. So really, really insightful. So yeah, great choice there. So for the top of my list, one I'm going to talk about for the beginning. Actually, I'm going to cheat right from the start. So I'm going to pick two books by the same authors though. So I'm going to put them in the kind of the same category. But Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote the book Who Not How, and that became pretty popular a few years ago and stuff like that. Great book. It really taught focuses on basically, we all talk about like, hey, we want to make money or we want to grow this or we want to do this. When we usually think about like, how do I do this? Well, this book focuses on more of not like, how do you do this, but who can do this for me or who
Mm,
can get this done for you. So really talks about like how to kind of grow your team and kind of trust people underneath you and put people in those right positions and kind of help you out with all that stuff. So great book there. But then the newest one that came out, I've read it, or actually listened to it twice so far. It's a great listen, is The Gap and the Gain. This was a big one for me just because I'm somebody that like, you talk to me about something, you talk about our business, it's, if it's going well, I'm usually like, it's going all right, but man, we're doing this wrong, or like we're having trouble with this or whatever. That's my mindset. And I kind of focus on some of not that I'm a negative person, but I always look for improvement. But Gap in the Gain is a great book because it talks about necessarily not focusing on that gap of kind of those downfalls and where you're like kind of having trouble within your business, but focus on the gain. Like always look back and reflect on, oh wow, we've improved on this, or we've done a lot better with this, or man, last year we're at this point, or 5 years ago we're at this point. Focusing on that gain and realizing like, oh, we have made a lot of gains. We have done really well and stuff like that. So that's a great mindset shift book for me. Great stuff there by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So Brett, how about next for you, man?
Yeah, I think a book is called the 80/20 Principle, and it's by Richard. I don't know if I say his last name right, Richard Koch, Koch. And basically, a lot of people have heard the 80/20 Principle, but really just kind of dives into in business that 80% of your income comes from 20% of your effort, or 80% of your income might come from 20% of your marketing. So it kind of is just really kind of niches it down where is my effort best used. So for me, like, because I'm maybe the leader of the company, where should I spend the most of my effort, or where should you spend most of your money? Again, you're looking at your marketing channels and possibly employees. And again, like your employees, like 80% of your income comes from 20% of your employees. So this principle goes all over the board. You can use it in your personal life and your business life. And so I heard one guy say, like, you look at your wardrobe and you only wear like 20% of your clothes. So that's just an example. A really great book, but again, it just kind of helps you take a step back and like, where should I spend my effort? Where should I spend my money? And look for that 20%, because that's going to increase the 80. So
Yeah. It was really cool. The first time I read that book, I missed this principle, but it was really big for me. The second time I got into it, and somebody else kind of like pointed this out to me too, is like, I'm a perfectionist. Like, I usually like try to get things perfect before I hand it off or hand it over. And I just talked in my last book about getting people to help me out and do things and stuff. 80/20 principle is great for me because I realize, like, when we implement something within the business, or I'm doing something within even like within my personal life or whatever, I need to get it like 80% good enough. Like, if I can get it 80% of the way there, and then I work with my team or my wife or my family or whatever it is to get to the rest of the 20% of the way. Or if I can get it to 80% and then hand it off to an employee and let them finish the rest of the 20%, that's good enough. Like, that's going to be okay. Don't wait for it to get to 100%, or it's probably never going to start it. So great book
that's
there.
good.
Yeah, the next one I have on my list is Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. Great leadership book, manager book. If you are somebody in the position that you're promoting somebody on your team to a manager role, or you have stepped into that manager role, you have people actually underneath you or anything like that, amazing book. The book very well could be entitled like, "Hey, do you want to feel like a terrible leader? Read this book." Like, it could be like that. But basically what it talks about is us as a leader. There's basically, we fall into three categories. Either we're going to be a multiplier, someone that with anybody that's underneath us, we're going to multiply their talents and get the most out of them. And not because we're a slave driver or anything like that, but just because we are a great leader and manager. And they're really just kind of, we're upgrading who they are. We're multiplying their efforts and multiplying like that. Or we can fall into the category of a diminisher, where we're kind of taking things away, and maybe they're only doing like things at 50 to 60% because we're diminishing like kind of who they are. We're not getting the most out of their talents. Or a lot of us, I know I've definitely fell into this category where I'm an accidental diminisher, where I think I'm helping, but I'm not. I'm actually diminishing and kind of doing some things. A great example of this, I love the example they use as a teacher. I really related to this as well. They use the example of in school when a student would, like, maybe you asked your teacher like, "Hey, how do I help out with this problem?" or "How do you do this problem?" or whatever. Sometimes you would take that piece of chalk or the dry erase marker or the pencil away from the student and show them how to do it. Well, they talk about like basically giving them giving them the pencil, like keeping the pencil in their hand and just talking them through it and working through it. And I know that's one of the reasons that made me a great teacher and stuff like that. I need to relate that to the business world as well, and not just like do things for people to help them out, but basically just talk them through things. So Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, great book. Awesome if you're like I said, if you're jumping into that leadership or managerial role.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna pick out a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And this is a great book on sales, and it just talks about how to negotiate. And Chris Voss was a terrorist negotiator. So he had to negotiate with terrorists that had hostages. And he basically called it Never Split the Difference because he couldn't really split the difference. He couldn't say, "Hey, you got 4 hostages. Why don't you kill 2 and give me 2 and we'll split the difference?" He said he couldn't do that. So he kind of took that same principle and went into business. And it's very practical. It's very simple. And it's very something that you can use like next week when you're talking to someone. And again, it doesn't have to be like we're in real estate, so we're always negotiating with private sellers. It doesn't have to be that, but it could also be when you're negotiating, when you're buying a car, if you're negotiating with your kids, right? It could be a lot of these different things that you can use in your life. But a great book, Never Split the Difference, and it's really entertaining because you get to read about terrorist negotiation.
He's got some cool stories. He's got some cool stories in there. And it's like, what? How can somebody like deal with people in this? And
Yeah.
awesome stuff there. And it's the funny thing is like how great it is the transition from from what he was doing in the real world to business, and how it does relate into business, how it relates into just everyday life. Honestly, we're always in negotiations. Whether it's about, with your, I'm sure you negotiate with your kids on what foods to eat and, what time to eat, when to go to bed and when to brush, like you're always in negotiations and stuff, but business world's the same thing. There's so many, decisions that we make or things we negotiate that we maybe don't even think about throughout that stuff. Along with his, the book, Never Split the Difference with Chris Voss, I definitely recommend his master class as well. That series of master classes out there, definitely recommend that as well. Just kind of watch that and go through it, and he kind of digs into some of the principles that he puts in Never Split the Difference a little bit more and stuff. And when I watched the master class along with it, I understood them a little bit more of how to mirror, how to label, and things like that. So definitely really cool. So Brett, we're kind of as we're kind of going through these and stuff like that, I want to kind of ask you of just kind of we're at the half point of kind of going through our top 5 list here or whatever. Like what is it for you when it comes to reading or kind of self-development, of like, when was that change for you of like, oh wow, I can improve myself through books, or I can, man, this is helping my business out, or anything on that note of like, when was that turn for you and when did you realize that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was around my mid-20s. I never was a book reader, hated books in school, never read a book. I always asked, is there a movie with this book? Because I want to watch the movie. But it was around
You're
my
probably
mid-20s.
with me, the same cliff notes in our age, in high school and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, my son just came in. But basically, yeah, I was around my mid-20s and really just started getting into business, entrepreneurship, and just realized that there's a lot of good books, a lot of books that I'm really interested in. I was really interested in business, got a hold of some of these books that really I started learning and started executing, and that was it. But then there was also a time in my upper 20s that I stopped reading. I thought that, oh, I've read enough, I've learned enough. And that was that time of, I kind of stalled out, my growth stalled out. So then I kind of got back into it. So really for me, again, one of my core values is consistently growing. I think books is a great way. I listen to podcasts as well. And it's just whatever I want to grow in. I want to grow as a man. I want to grow as a husband, as a father, as a businessman, as a leader. I want to grow in my health. And whenever I want to grow in anything, I think we all want to grow, right? If I asked every single person that's listening to this show, do you want to grow in one of these areas of your life? They would all say yes. I think books is a great way to start. So.
Yeah. I think one of the things along with that is, I'll throw in here as well, as I've been in a situation too where I've read a book and stuff like that, and then I was like, hey, we're going to implement this tomorrow, like in the business and stuff. Like, so it is great for growth and great for all that stuff. But it's also, you got to do it responsibly. It's just like with everything, read this and implement this responsibly within what you're doing within your business or within your personal life or whatever it is. You can't go from 0 to 60. I know in our mastermind, we talk a lot about going from 0 to 1, just like implementing that one thing. So one of the things I would recommend too, if you're in that position where you want to implement something in your life or your business is for growth and for personal development or whatever it may be. Obviously, if it just revolves around you, like, go ahead and feel free to implement and stuff. But if it involves your team or your family or whatever, like, share it with them. I know one of the best things to do is, like, if you want to implement something like within your personal life, and maybe you need some accountability with it or anything, like, have your wife read it along with you or your partner read it along with you. Same thing with in your business. If you can we do a lot of our leadership team, we'll read books together and kind of dig into it and kind of go to it that way. And I think it's just a great way to kind of, number one, you can get the buy-in. They understand where you're coming from. You're not just coming in and being like, oh, I read this book last night, we're going to do this, we're going to change this up. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business leaders, they do that. And that's tricky and stuff. So you want to make sure that like I said, you want to read books responsibly and implement, some of their stuff responsibly as well as you're going out in there. So good stuff. So the next book I have on my list is the book Winning by Tim Grover. Brett, have you read this book yet?
I have not.
So,
No.
all right, you
Writing
you
these
you
down.
need to put this on your list, man. This is one that you'll appreciate. So this is by Tim Grover. Was the um basically he was the trainer for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, a lot of NBA players, a lot of athletes and stuff like that. And literally he just talks about like their mindset of like, just when it comes to like what made Michael Jordan so great is just his mindset of
Mm,
like, there was no coming in second. There was
mm,
no like taking a day off. Kobe Bryant was the same way. Dwayne Wade was the same way. And Tim Grover kind of goes through all these different stories, and there's, tells a lot of different stories and things like that through here of just the little things that they did. And the little things that, when Michael Jordan loses the Pistons, and basically says, Tim Grover asks him like, oh, do you need a week off or a month off or anything? He's like, I'll be in the gym tomorrow at 6:00 a.m. Just all those little things, like how to get better and how to improve and all those things. Really, really cool and really, really great book. He also did a book, Relentless, kind of the same principles, kind of the same thing. Talks a lot about Michael Jordan and stuff like that. Winning is kind of a mix of Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, some other players as well. Really cool. I'll put a disclaimer on here too. There's a lot of cussing through this book. If you do listen to it or anything, so don't listen to it when you're in a car with your kids or anything like that. Maybe for you, Brett. But
yeah.
really cool book. But like I said, this is a great mindset book. It's great stories and great. If you're a sports fan, you're going to love it in general and stuff, but just a great mindset of not quitting and just, driven to that winning atmosphere of, or winning desire, and what sets winners apart from everything else and things. So it's pretty cool the way he kind of set this book up and things there. It goes through, he has, I believe there's 13 different chapters, but they're not like, it's not like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's just, they're all chapter 1. So it's like nothing is more important than anything else, and kind of getting into that and stuff. But some really good stories that he shares, and it's just kind of one of those things too, as he's talking through this, and he relates it back into like how some of the things that he's been able to do with his family and been able to do in his personal life, and how it's helped improve and stuff like that too. But sometimes too, when you're in that mindset of like, man, I gotta buckle down and I gotta dig into this, and you know what, I can't focus on this for a little while because I have to get this done and I have to do it really, really well and stuff. So great book. But Winning by Tim Grover, and definitely recommend checking out Relentless too by him. So Brett, what you got next, man?
Yeah, I did a presentation on this book a few years ago called "The Five Dysfunctions of a Team" by Patrick Lincione, and really just like this book. So again, I think these books were different seasons of my life, and this book really came at a great time when I was leading a team, the real estate team, and it just goes into some of the dysfunctions of a team, and kind of like lets you take a step back, be radically honest with yourself and your team, and be like, okay, what is going wrong here, and what do I need to do? So some of the dysfunctions are, again, fear of conflict, for example. So if you're leading a team, but you have a fear of conflict and you don't like talking about conflict, that could be a dysfunction, right? And we have to figure out, okay, how do I get over that fear of conflict, and how do we talk in a responsible way and in a healthy way about conflict? Another one is absence of trust. So like that's one of the ones, dysfunctions of a team. And again, it's like, well, when you look at your team, do you trust your team? I think, Brian, we've talked about this. It's like, wow, Brian's running, he's CEO of our business, and a lot of it, the number one thing is trust. People talk to me all the time about lending and how do I talk to private lenders and how do I work with private lenders? And I said, the number one thing that a private lender has in their mind is do I trust you? Do I trust you? If crap hits the fan, and are you going to pay me back? So again, that's a great book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Again, you kind of get honest with yourself and your team about what makes you feel like a bad leader too.
Yeah.
Just like multipliers. So great book.
It's funny, and it's one of those things. I guess I think it's one of those things of like making sure. Maybe I should have read The Gap. Maybe we should both read The Gap and The Game before we read any of these books. I'm not focusing on like the negative stuff, but focusing on like the positive things that we do and things like that. But I think it's great. It's one of those things, Brett, as you pointed out, and I think I know as you read this before, but then I think when you did the presentation, I kind of worked or helped you with the presentation. We talked a lot about it and things like that, and there was a lot of things that. That's the whole reason that you're reading books like this, is not to feel like a bad leader, not to put yourself down, but to be like, oh wow, okay, yeah, I I need to improve here. I can't improve here. And I think that's one of the biggest downfalls. I think we could ever read a book or read a podcast or go to a mastermind or go to a speaker or anything like that is sit there and be like, oh, I'm not getting anything out of this. I know this. Like, don't like, I don't care what you listen to or what you're reading or anything like that. You got to be able to get something out of it. And, you know, have that. I think that's a mindset shift within that too. Not thinking that you know everything or not thinking that you're the best at everything and stuff like that. And be the humbleness to basically take it in and listen, and be like, you know what? Yeah, I can improve in this, or I think I'm good at this, but yeah, I could do better and things like that. So great book along with that. Brent, did you ever have that like with you? I don't know. You're kind of, I feel like you and I are, we're pretty similar in some things and like that. I know that I was definitely like that as a teacher. I look back at I'd go to a teaching seminar and stuff like that, and people would be up there speaking and be like, I'm a good teacher. I know I can't get anything out of this and stuff like that. But it was a huge mindset shift for me of realizing like, hey, whatever I do, whatever I'm going to try to be the best at anything I do. But then also anytime I go listen to somebody or read something, I'm going to get something out of it that I can help to improve my life. Did you ever go through that phase of like, oh man, I don't need this. I'm all right.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually brings up another book that I'll just kind of throw out there. It's called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he studied these businesses, that what separates the businesses that go to the great businesses. Like what's the big separator? And one of them was humility. I think that's what leaders have to have. They said the leaders of these great businesses practiced humility, which is exactly what you're talking about. So if you go to this, you listen to this amazing speaker, like let's just say Tony Robbins, and maybe you're like, okay, I can get a lot out of him. But then you go to your local community RIA, right? And you're like, oh, I don't get anything out of this. Well, great leaders practice humility, where like they can get something out of their local RIA as well. And a lot of these books, again, are just basic principles. And it's like, oh, I do know it. Like I do know a lot of this stuff, but do I actually practice it? Do I need reminded? Exactly. So again, I think what you said, Brian, is just kind of practice that humility. And you can learn from the basic books, from the most amazing speakers, the basic speakers. So yeah.
So
agree.
On that note of, oh, I know this, but do I implement it? Let's talk about this book, Traction by Gino Wickman. This is a great book. It's a great book. You know, he developed EOS, you know, entrepreneurial operating system. And basically what he does in Traction, it's what it is. It's an operating system of how to run your business. And I think a lot of times people go through this of like, oh, I know how to do this, or I know how to run a meeting, or, oh, I know my data, I know my numbers and things like that. Like, the reality is like, do you actually know them, or do you actually know how to run a meeting effectively and efficiently and all those things? And that's what he really does with just Traction and everything that he does. There's a ton of books out there that he has now like, that are based off of, you know, this principle and stuff like that. So I know he has one book too, just how to be a great boss. It kind of comes back to these principles and things as well. But with Traction, he's really just going through that of like, hey, here's kind of how you should set up your meetings. Here's how you can kind of set up. Here's how you should be running your day to day. Here's what, from everything that he's learned with working with multiple businesses, here's how these successful businesses operate. Here's the things that they do. And I did, you know, as a coach, we used to implement Traction and EOS and stuff like that. Now we do the Empire operating system, which, you know, Gary Harper and Eddie Wilson wrote and developed and stuff. And I see this all the time working with, you know, business leaders, not just from real estate, from other businesses as well. But when you say like, hey, this is, you know, the top 100, top 500 companies in the world, this is kind of how they operate and the things that they do. And they're kind of like, oh, well, that's good, but I'm going to do it this way and things like that. And then they call me, you know, a month later and be like, hey, things aren't working out. Well, did you do this? Did you go back to this? But, you know, Gino Wickman early and all this stuff. And with Traction, he really sets up of like, hey, this is how you get traction in your business, by operating things this way, by kind of handling things this way. Here's how, you know, here's the things you need to be covering. Here's the things you need to be looking at. And all those types of things. But a great book here. And I know, Brett, you were kind of one of the people that turned me on to Gino Wickman and stuff as well. So I know you really enjoy his books as well.
Yeah. Traction. I mean, that was another just big moment for me. Learn how to do the real estate business, but didn't know how to run a business. And Traction, along with Scaling Up with Gary Harper. And then we had another coach, Will Ditzler, along the way too. And just kind of learning how to run the business. So if you're in business, you need to learn how to run it. It's a process, it's a system, and it works. And I think if you just kind of implement this system, it's going to work just like you've seen in many companies, Brian.
Yeah. So awesome, man. What you got next on your list?
Well, we're getting through these, but I would say another great book, again, just kind of just developing those habits, is Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
Again, just a great reminder as a leader, how to run your life, how to run your business, and just kind of developing these great habits. Again, all these books, it's really just kind of developing this habit, right? I mean, a lot of these books, 80-20 principle, 5 dysfunctions of a team, just a lot of these things is how you can develop these, train your mind. You talk about mindset, train your mind and your business to have these certain habits. So you have to have it. And then how can you transfer that to your team?
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, 100%. So, last one on my list here, we're kind of doing top five, and actually I have a couple extra ones I might mention too. Yeah, I think you might have a couple as well, but yeah, last one kind of on my top five list of just like, if you want to grow your business and you want to kind of develop as a leader and a manager and all those things. Last one I have is coactive leadership. Basically it's 5 ways to lead. This is going to be kind of I don't know if this is out there, and this is kind of an obscure one a little bit, but it's by Karen and Henry Kisme House. They do. They have a coaching program that they do. They have coactive coaching is what they kind of is their coaching program and stuff like that. And then coactive leadership as well. I got a ton of stuff out of this book. Basically, what they talk about, like as a leader, like there's basically kind of 5 different ways you can lead. And I won't dig into it too much, but basically how you lead from the front, how you lead from behind, how you lead from beside, how you lead with it, all these different ways that you actually lead. And it's a great book to kind of focus on, like, you don't always have to be at the front of the room, giving direction, talking about what's going on and things like that, but actually how to lead, on when you can sit down with your employees or your team members, like on a one-on-one basis, and talk to them and lead that way. Or sometimes, you have to put people, level people up and let them lead, and you just kind of sit in the back and let them handle things and stuff like that. And it's a great book to develop and things. So I did a presentation on this book before, and went over pretty well, but this reminds me of, I don't know if there's a meme that's out there, a picture out there of basically it's a line of gray wolves out in the snow, and then always it talks about like how I think it like kind of positions the wolves in different ways. It says like, here the 3 wolves at the front are like the strongest wolves, so they're leading the pack, and then they have like the next wolves that are like, maybe they're the older wolves. They have to kind of like, they're kind of in the middle or towards the front, but they have to go at their pace. So that's where they are. And they have like, then all the other wolves, and there's like the leaders in the back. And that's where the wolf is. Like that picture's been out there. I've seen it circulated multiple times, and all these people commenting on it and like, oh, that's a great leader. Like that's actually not true at all by the wolves. It's basically that lead wolf, or the leader of the wolf pack or the wolf den or whatever it is. Like that wolf positions himself wherever he needs to be, depending on the situation, depending on what's going on. That's what that wolf is going to do. Sometimes he's in the middle, sometimes he's the front, sometimes he's the end. It's whatever the pack needs him to be. That's what he's going to do. This book reminds me of that, and I kind of threw that in there when I presented on it and stuff. But amazing book, but really really good stuff. Their coaching program is amazing as well and things. So I do have a couple other books just to mention, just because it's hard to kind of get a list down to 5 and things. So definitely this is the book that I just started reading. And it's been pretty impactful already. But I have a lot of people that reach out to me we just talked about it in all these books of like with multipliers and with traction and things like that, of like leveling people up and like kind of letting your team kind of handle things and stuff like that. I just had a conversation with somebody last week, and they said, as a CEO, I have a lot of team members. I've leveled everybody up. Like, I don't know what to do with my time. I don't know what to do next, and things like that. This book by Trey Taylor just came out. It's an amazing book, but it's a CEO only does 3 things. But basically the focus is on like, what are the 3 most important things that a CEO does. So just a quick little mention there for that one. If anybody's going through that, it'd be a good book. Also, this is a little bit business, a little bit entrepreneur, but also just this is heavy personal for me. I love anything by Bob Goff. Bob Goff, one of my favorite authors of all time. He wrote books like Love Does, Dream Big, Undistracted. He's an amazing entrepreneur. He's an amazing businessman and stuff like that. But this is, man, he tells some just fun stories, and it's good things. So it's a good life book, good idea book, just good relationship, good business book as well. But anything by Bob Goff, I'd also recommend. So Brett, do you have anything for yourself that you would throw in here as well as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think the one book I forgot to mention is The One Thing. I think it's a
Yeah.
great book. Really just kind of focus. You can't focus on multiple things at the same time. So he tells some great stories. It's like if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at the eggs or and which type of eggs are you going to pick out, and but then you think about your business and then you're like, well, what eggs? And you can't think about two things at the same time very well. So again, he just kind of talks about the one thing. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this, they're doing multiple businesses and different things. So yeah, that's a great book.
Great book right there. So awesome.
So, and then the last one, I don't know if you want to wrap it up with that, is it's just the Bible. And this is a book that I go to. Obviously, it's funny how a lot of these books and a lot of these principles and these basic habits and what we put people first, pour in the people, the servant, the borrower, servant to the lender, don't get into a lot of debt, things like that. I mean, I think you can all really relate to a lot of great principles out of the Bible. So go read the book of Proverbs. There's some great business guys, Solomon in the Bible, things like that. So that's a book that I highly recommend as well.
So if you know anything about Brett now, you know that Brett, the Bible is on probably the top of most of our list and stuff like that. So we had to definitely talk about and stuff. But I mean, honestly, when you're looking, you have some amazing leaders. And kind of, we talked about multiple things here. One of the things we talked about on this podcast was the humility that leaders have. When you're looking at David and the humility that he has in certain situations and stuff like that, when you look at the transformation that from Saul to Paul and kind of the leadership that he ended up taking in his life before and after. Solomon was a great example that you mentioned and stuff. But Jesus was an amazing leader. And it's just looking at the way that he, how he did things, the gentleness that he did things, the principles that he stood by and things like that. Like he was just, that's what it comes down to, is he's an amazing leader, and you can take some amazing leadership things out of that. But then also, of course, you got the life lessons and, the marriage lessons and just in general and stuff like that. So yes, definitely, Bible, we're going to wrap up today. Talking about the Bible, and definitely a book that you should read if you want to develop as a person, as a leader, grow within yourself, grow within your business and things like that. But Brett, any last little thoughts before we jump off here, man?
No, I mean, I think that's it. It's a great list. I mean, if you just wrote down all those books, this year is pretty much covered. So,
there you go.
So you can learn so much, but then I think it's just execute. You can learn so much, but really the rubber hits the road about executing these different things. And like you said, Brian, you can't do it all at once. You have to, it's just at 0 to 1.
Yep.
If you think you're going to do all these things, you just can't do it. It's just that 1%. Can you grow consistently 1% every day, every week, even a year? It's that's where it's at.
So love it, man. Great stuff. Yeah. Great list that we developed here. Let us know if you have any questions about any of these books, or if you missed an author or have any questions or anything like that. I'm more than happy to help you out. If you have any questions about your business or about real estate or what's going on in Indianapolis, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can hit me up at brian@simplewholesaling.com. More than happy to help you out. If you need anything from Brett at simplewholesaling.com. We do like to keep things simple around here. So let us know how we can help you out in any way. But with that, that's a wrap for this episode of the Indie Investor Pod. See you guys next time. Take care.